we should start. Good afternoon to all of you, including high-level representatives who are still with us, and of course HELCOM observers, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends of the Baltic Sea, being with us today both on-site and online. I'm happy to see that we have quite a lot of people joining us online as well. On behalf of the WWF Baltic Ecoregion Program and Coalition Clean Baltic, I'm delighted to warmly welcome you to this side event. How can regional financial flows in the seascape help support and restore the Baltic Sea? Following the ministerial meeting of the Baltic Sea Marine Environment Protection Commission, or Helsinki Commission, which has adopted today the updated Baltic Sea Action Plan. So congratulations to that. My name is Mikael Durkin, and I'm Executive Secretary at Coalition Clean Baltic, or CCB in short, and I will be facilitating this event today. We have quite an ambitious and interesting agenda today, so it is important that we follow a few simple rules. Of course, we have to comply with the corona regulations that you're all aware of already. Wearing face masks when you are standing, and you can remove it while seated. Please also obey time limitations, and that applies to both speakers and the audience. So we would have 10 minutes for presentations of keynote speeches and 5 minutes for questions after those. Come up to the speaking stand in front of this room here if you wish to pose a question from the audience on site in this room. And it is needed for practical matters, including simultaneous translation that we have. Please ask your questions in question and answer section of Zoom stream if you are participating online. And also my apologies, but to avoid spending too much time at properly introducing our speakers today, I would like you to familiarize yourself with the short biographical notes of our today's speakers and panelists. Please also note that this side event will be streamed on CCB's YouTube account and recorded. As well as I already mentioned, it will be interpreted for online viewers into German, Polish, and Russian. To enable interpretation, please press interpretation button and choose respective language. Also, if you have any objections for taking photos, please inform our communication staff here on the ground. So finally, moving ahead and without further undue delay, I would like to stress that this joint event by WWF and CCB is yet another contribution of civil society to the update of the Baltic Sea Action Plan, and now more importantly for the implementation of the BSAP. It has been a long process, starting with the Baltic Shadow Plan delivered by our organizations to HELCOM in 2019. And that's the Shadow Plan. You can find also some printed copies at the back of this room. We also addressed the ministers, teaming up together with the prominent Baltic scientists. We also addressed the ministers of environment of HELCOM contracting parties with our asks of making the updated BSAP more concrete and ambitious. A few copies of those inputs are also available at the back of the room. But now, of course, it's time for the implementation of agreed actions, and therefore we would like to bring the issue of how financial flows in the seascape help supporting and restoring Baltic Sea. So we would like to bring it into focus of this meeting. So with these introductory words, I would like to give the floor for the welcoming words to current HELCOM chair, Dr. Lilian Busse, representing Germany and its Environmental Protection Agency, who kindly agreed to introduce the side event. So Lilian, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mikael. So it's an exciting day for the health of the Baltic Sea with the adoption of the HELCOM Baltic Sea Action Plan. So I'm very excited about that, and I'm very happy that I can say a couple of welcoming words here at the side event. As you heard, my name is Lilian Busse. I'm chairing HELCOM. For 2 years, I started last year, and I keep chairing this until next June with my 2 vice chairs from Mecklenburg-Vorpommern and Schleswig-Holstein. WWF and CCB are very close partners to HELCOM. All of you know that. I'm very happy that we have a close and good cooperation, and I see them, I would call them, they are our critical friends. So it's really helpful. You were holding up the shadow plan, that was helpful, and it was really apparent the good cooperation in the work of updating the BSAP, which we now have successfully concluded. So thank you for that. We just have adopted the Baltic Sea Action Plan. We just heard it. Now we will have to implement it. So the hard work starts now as we speak. And we also all know there's no such a thing as a free lunch. So it will be hard work. And we start actually today with this side event. To achieve the measures laid out in the BSAP, it's therefore important that the governments create conditions to support a sustainable blue economy. It seems that the Baltic Sea region can be a truly blue sustainable economy, but this presupposes that funds are channeled towards sustainable rather than unsustainable activities. Unfortunately, and we all know that lots of money is supporting non-sustainable activities. But we also know funds are not inexhaustible, and therefore money that flows towards unsustainable processes not only promotes these processes, but also effectively is lost for sustainable activities and practices we need to promote. However, there are already some sustainable financial flows towards sustainable blue economy, but they're usually only on single objectives like climate adaptation or fishing. The goal must be that there are a greater number of objectives are underpinned by sustainable investments because there are interdependencies as well as conflicts, but we also have synergies. I'm sure this can be achieved, and this event will give us a glimpse of what can and needs to be done to ensure this. It will take a closer look at how the financial investments can support a sustainable blue economy and what improvements of the current financial flows are needed. I wish you all the best for this event, a fruitful discussion. I'm looking forward to working with you on this topic, but also on many others in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lilian, for your inspiring welcome address. And we will now move ahead to our keynote speakers, and I have a pleasure of passing the floor to Miroslav Proppe, Chief Executive Officer of the WWF Poland, who will present the seascape assessment of financial flows in the Baltic, a snapshot look at investment flows from 2016 to 2020 into the Baltic and what this might mean for the health of the Baltic Sea and the implementation of sustainable blue economy. So I would like to ask our technical staff to share. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Mikhail, for introduction. And thank you, Dr. Busse, for this words. As you said, the really hard work starts now after adopting the plan. And thank you very much for adopting the plan for the Baltic. The really hard work starts now. So let me share my screen with the presentation, with the summary finding of our research that we have performed. I hope you can see the presentation now. So what we asked ourselves and what we wanted to find out was whether the financial flows today, as they are in the Baltic seascape, in all the economies and sectors who are using the Baltic seascape, are they supporting sustainable blue economy, or are they rather contrary to the sustainable blue economy? As you know, financial flows are really the basis and the heart and the blood system, if you want to call it this way, of any activity, of any sectors and any development, really. And steering those financial flows is really steering up then the development of different technologies, different approaches, and different sectors. So we believe that this is a very important question to ask. What we wanted to do, and this is a very, very draft analysis or draft presentation, the first presentation of this report. The full report will be available within a couple of months, but what we want to emphasize is that we wanted to see this not only from the purely ecologic and environmental point of view, as this is very much important, but also from the point of view of possibilities of developing new technologies and possibilities of finding new ways of growth and development for the businesses, but also from the point of view of social impact and the future possibilities of people living around Baltic Sea to live in a sustainable way, but also in a way that allows fair living and fair working conditions. So this was the basis of our research. We were working with external consultants. We hired 3Keel Consulting, which were supported with the Global Research and Consulting, as well as Imperial College from the UK. And this is just briefly showing you the graph, showing you the methodology which was adopted. So both it was a lot of data gathering to find out, to measure those financial flows, but also bottom-up approach from the company level to see examples of different developments and different initiatives that are being taken by different companies and different sectors and the owners and the financial markets. So generally speaking, we can say that that the overall blue economy on the Baltic Sea is really an important and big part of the economy, as it was estimated to be 1.17 trillion euro per year over those 3 years analyzed from 2016 to 2018, with 6.5% increase of year over year. What's interesting is that the highest growth rates can be seen in extraction and in development of renewable energy. And as probably renewable energy is something that all of us agree that we have to invest and develop with some conditions of the sustainable development of this infrastructure. But anyway, this is the way to go. Then extraction of non-living resources from the sea is something that, for me at least, was kind of a little bit surprising finding, because that is something that is not necessarily sustainable, and it's hard to imagine that this kind of activities will be sustainable. Overall, gross value added, annual gross value added is approximately 263 billion euro. So this is a really important part of economies of all the countries around the Baltic Sea. And again, which is a little bit unhappy information, is that the non-living resource activities are the majority of this both the total turnover and also the increase. Why? I think this is an important call for all of us, that really the living Baltic is at the limits of its possibilities due to overfishing, overuse, over extraction, and all of this, and the pollution. And on the other hand, that we still continue with, especially the extraction sector, we still continue with the sectors and the activities that are decreasing the biodiversity of the Baltic and its health. This is a couple of interesting graphs showing you where the financing is coming from and how it is going to different sectors. So as we can see, for all companies, and also we were doing the analysis for private companies and and public companies, so publicly listed companies, you can see that the shareholder funds are the majority of funding. The debt is much less. It's for all companies, it's about 8-2. So 80% financing is through shareholder funds and 20% is from the debt. So that means that majority of efforts today, probably, we should be focusing on the owners of the companies to influence their change, not so much from the banking perspective, from the debt perspective. However, it is changing, because if we see what are the new additions of financing into the sectors, we can see that the debt is playing a major role, and issuance of debt is increasing a lot in all private and public companies. So this is not we forget that we need to speak to the financial sector, and especially to the banks and other financial market institutions about how they steer and how they report also the money that they borrow to the companies. So also we can say that there is an interesting view that the private companies are investing in biotech and bio prospect technologies, and we do not necessarily see those in public companies. So public companies are much more, I would say, to focus on traditional sectors like trade, renewables, energy, and extraction. But anyway, in both those sectors, the debt which is raised by both sectors, private and public, is dominated by the extraction activities. So again, this is what I was saying before, that still today a lot of money is being invested in the sector for the extraction services that are not necessarily supporting sustainable development and the health of the Baltic Sea. This is some statistics about the debt for the public companies. So you can see again that even renewable energy is the biggest portion of this debt. That extraction is still a very high part of this, and especially from banks and institutional loan borrowers. This is the biggest part of the loans that are being given to this sector. If we look at the public companies, but the shareholder funds, how they are invested, this is usually either the venture capitals, private equity funds, or typical traditional investment managers, and they are again in extraction, trade, and seafood, so traditional sectors. But also, as you can see, they are investing in biotechnology, marine biotechnology, and those new prospecting sectors or technologies, which is something that we would be happy to see much more. If we look at the transactions and major acquisitions, this is one of the biggest reason for the flows in the sector, in the companies within the Baltic seascape, and the vast majority of this goes to those two, the biotechnology and bioprospecting technologies and sectors. So this is a good, and this is, I think, an evidence that the private owners, they are looking for new technologies, and they understand that change is coming or is happening now, and needs to. They foresee that this will be the future growth of the companies, so they invest here. But still, if we look at the top 10 transactions within the extraction sector, again, you can see that this is still quite an important part of the merger and acquisition transactions. We also listed all the activities that are performed according to their influence on the environment and sustainable development, as well as social assessment. And you can see that, unfortunately, vast majority of those activities are not sustainable, except for this new marine biotechnology, some tourism, some renewable energy generation, but then majority of the activities are not necessarily supporting the sustainable and blue economy. So what we can say in the summary is that the new debt accounts for vast majority of all the flows, and the banks and international loaners are the most important debt the players in this debt instruments in terms of the new flow, the new addings of the flow into the system, into the sectors. So the financial actors, both the banks and traditional asset managers, are important because, as I was saying, the banks are providing majority of funding, but traditional asset managers are the majority of owners of the companies. And sectors extraction and trade still are taking majority of the loans. Renewable generation is growing, and this is good. But what we shall not forget is that with the speed of and the need of development of the renewable energy, we need to closely cooperate with the governments, local authorities, investors, and NGOs, environmental organizations, to be sure that those investments in renewable energy will be performed in a least harming way for the environment. So not only during the construction, but also during the use of this infrastructure, will not make too much harm to the environment. The study, as I said, will be available in a couple of months, and we'll be happy to share all the details with you. I think this is an important part of the planning implementation of action plan, to really know to who speak to who are the major players on the financial market with whom we all should speak, and delivering the message and sharing the information how they should report, also how they invest or borrow money, so we can see that the flows are really concentrated on those sectors and those activities that will support blue economy development. Thank you very much. And if you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them now.
Thank you very much, Miroslav. Well, I will open now the floor for questions for about 5 minutes. And thanks, Miroslav, for keeping the time for your presentation. So I cannot see any questions here in the audience yet. So perhaps we are still warming up. There was one question in question and answers online, but I'm not really sure if it is that much applicable. It is from Marina Parkina, who asks whether Russian government, well, she comments that Russian government is trying to get maximum from Russian piece of Baltic coast. It is impossible to prove that green economy is a prolonged success, and activists in Russia are helpless. So this is rather a comment, I think, than a question. Unless you, Miroslav, would like to, well, either comment or respond in some way to this.
Thank you. Well, I think not going into the politics and details of international issues and relations, I think if we always, at the end of the day, with all the respect, but all the rhetorics spoken by anyone is verified with the financial flows. That's the truth. So if we really, with all due respect, and I know that my colleagues from WWF in Russia, they have the easiest work to do. But anyway, if we concentrate on the financial sector and we speak to those players, both the banks, traditional financing institutions, but also private equity funds and so on, those that are supported with the public money and those which just play with the private money, we will be able to steer the flows of the finance, and with this way we'll build the new sustainable way of defining the possibility to compete on the market, and this will be a natural way for all other companies that are not necessarily taking the use of financing from those institutions. But anyway, to compete on the market, they will have to also adopt, and this will be a way to move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miroslav, for this answer and remark. And thanks for not going that deep into the politics, but rather exactly showing that still financial actors can be involved and we can address them from the environmental community to ensure that financial flows into regional or local economies are still done in a sustainable way. So yes, please, Bettina Taylor from BUND, Friends of the Earth, Germany, please.
Yes, thank you very much for this interesting talk. I have a question. You said it a little bit at the end, how you assess renewable energy, because I think we have to also make clear in this financial sector that renewable energy is not per se always a positive factor. If you put a wind park in a marine protected areas, it might not be a positive way to influence. So I think this blue economy, this thought, okay, this is good, this is bad, is something we have to, I think, really look more differentiated. And there's not an endless space, for example, to put offshore windmills, as much as we would like renewable energies, but there have to be also thoughts and ways to assess this, that it's not per se a good investment to put an offshore wind park in there, depending on where it's put, how it's put. And you mentioned it a little bit, but I'd like if you could maybe just explain a little more how you assessed it in your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Bettina.
Thank you for this question. This is really an important issue, because, as you said, we should not be overwhelmed that now, yes, we will develop the renewable energy sources, and that's why we will put solar panels on 2/3 of country X, and then the offshore wind farms on, I don't know, half of the Baltic Sea. Exactly. And this is why the dialogue is very important. How we were assessing this in the report, not necessarily in this report. In this report, we were rather looking for what kind of investments are planned and where the financial flows are going. But per se, so we could see that the renewable energy is a growing, and especially offshore, is a growing market and growing sector. And also from the point of view of climate change and reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, we know that we need offshore wind as one of the sources of the power. Now, the very good question is whether something like energy sustainability for any of the European countries, but speaking here, any of the countries around Baltic Sea, is possible without cooperation. And I would say no, that this is not possible without the cooperation. So first of all, we need to work closely together. And this is why I'm really very happy that you were able today to agree the action plan for the Baltic. The second thing is we should see the Baltic as the opportunity for developing offshore wind, but also as the opportunity to protect the biodiversity that is needed for the fisheries, but it's also needed for tourism, but it's also needed for the stability of the whole ecosystem. Ecosystems also on the land that depends on the sea ecosystem. So for this, I think you were discussing this today, that the protection areas and defining the protection areas and defining what this means, the protected area, and what is possible to do there and what is not possible to do there, and balancing the use of the Baltic Sea as in some kind source of renewable energy, as a space for the offshore wind farms, must be done together with national energy plans. And that's why this is, on the one hand, challenging, but on the other hand, absolutely ambitious and interesting task to do. And this is why I believe that the cooperation between all of us is necessary. If we put too much renewable sources of energy into the Baltic and we demolish the Baltic Sea, we will face the consequences in other parts of and other sectors. So we cannot allow this. This is the clue of the sustainable development, that we need to see this in a holistic way. I have no, the very precise answer that we should have this amount of the wind poles, offshore wind poles on the Baltic Sea. This is something that we need to collectively develop. But this is what I said, I think, a couple of times, that's why we need to work together, both the authority, all parties, the authorities, the sectors, the financing sector, and the environmental organizations. Thank you. Hopefully,
thank you very much.
I answered the question.
Thank you very, very much, Miroslav, and thanks for all your presentation and responses to the questions. And we have to move on. So we will continue with the value at risk in the blue economy report that will be presented by Alison Mitchell, Senior Sustainable Finance Specialist from WWF United Kingdom. The report examines business as usual versus a sustainable development pathway and how quantifying ocean risk can shape the transition to sustainable blue economy. So very welcome, Alison.
Thank you so much. I'm going to just share my screen here. Hopefully everyone can see. Great. Firstly, thank you very much for the introduction. As mentioned before, my name is Alison Mitchell. I am a Sustainable Finance Specialist at WWF UK. So today I would just like to walk you through a tool we've recently developed and the results of a first assessment report that looked at value at risk in the blue economy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by walking you through who the contributors were to this report, and then I'll take you through some of the broader methodological points and then some of the results. So this project was spearheaded by WWF. We collaborated with the systems modeling experts Metabolic, and we were supported by the Ocean Risk and Resilience Action Alliance, who are a multi-sector collaboration with the insurance industry and whose mandate is to provide innovative finance and insurance products to manage ocean risk. We also included multiple industry collaborators who provided advisory and guidance as well as a peer review. So that included the MSCI stock index providers, Responsible Risk, Verisk Maplecroft, Ocean Mind, UNIBFI, and Green Digital Solutions. So just to give you some context and background to this project, at the beginning of the work, we asked ourselves why the impacts on the ocean environment that we see in our work and the risks that they pose to businesses operating within them rarely seem to be taken into account in the asset allocation of larger investor groups. So we identified particularly a lack of adequate data and tools to fairly inform that decision-making, especially in data-poor areas like the ocean, where industries are often operating using shared resources and in unregulated global waters. We also found that there was a lack of understanding about what sustainable interventions could be prioritized for governments, businesses, and for finance. So what we basically wanted to do was develop a methodology that could help us understand the potential value at risk to marine and coastal investments. But more than that, we also wanted to find out how much risk we could mitigate, or how much value we could gain if we applied sustainable interventions. But just some background, what happened was in 2019, we did a pilot study with a large Swedish institutional investor to develop a method that would assess the value at risk across their investment portfolio, particularly looking at where those investment risks arise from investments in the Baltic blue economy. We only covered ports, shipping, and fisheries. And so in 2020, we expanded that methodology to 6 different blue economy sectors. And we tried to create a blueprint risk methodology that could basically be used by any investor who wanted to replicate this methodology for their own equities portfolio, so their own company investment portfolio. Now, at the same time, there was a growing body of materials that was being developed to help investors understand and mitigate ocean risks. And that included the Sustainable Blue Economy Finance Principles, Turning the Tide, which is the UNIBFI guidance documents for investor groups, and then also some complementary initiatives like the EU Blue Taxonomies and the climate risk and environmental risk reporting frameworks like the TCFD. So a lot of the results of this report we see as being quite complementary to some of the needs of these various tools, and can hopefully help investors understand their contribution to these tools better. Just to give a bit of background into the methodology. So what we did was, it was quite a unique methodology. It's the first of its kind, and it incorporates something called systems dynamics, a systems dynamics approach, basically, which is a bottom-up methodology. So what that looks like is you start by mapping various interdependent drivers and pressures in the blue economy, mapping the key actors and how they affect each other, both directly and indirectly, under different environmental scenarios. It captures positive feedback loops and negative feedback loops, and can also look at impacts that occur very indirectly, so well away from the source of the impact. The model also looked at how these changes would affect potential revenues generated in the blue economy, and also the value of assets from various industry actors. What we then did was apply that over 2 different future scenarios. We had a business as usual scenario, which is RCP 8.5 in the climate scenario sense, basically where there are no changes in sustainability efforts or achievements to mitigate any global emissions. Sorry, just double checking, you can all hear me. Right, and then the second scenario is the sustainable development scenario. What that looks like is RCP 4.5. So we assume we can manage global emissions, we keep ourselves within 2 degrees temperature rise, and a range of other sustainability interventions were put in place. Like, for example, managing plastics pollution, managing pollution incidents in general, scaling up sustainable investment alternatives like green infrastructure compared to grey infrastructure, policy interventions like a carbon tax, etc. Now, the results were quite interesting. Under a business as usual scenario, we found that about $8.4 trillion would be at risk to those 6 sectors over the next 15 years if we don't transition to a more sustainable way of doing business. The sustainable development scenario, on the other hand, only had about $3.3 trillion at risk. So what that means is that that's about a $5.1 trillion potential risk mitigation or potential savings, which is substantial. It's almost double the UK's GDP as it stands today. The second part of the methodology was where we tried to calculate how those risks could potentially affect the industry actors that we'd mapped in our global model. So what we did was made it an exposure table, which covered about 8,000 different companies, all listed companies, who form part of the MSCI ACWI IMI company index. We created the table that you see here on the right-hand side of my screen using the general industry classification system known as GICS. And that maps out, it's often used as a sort of a reference material for financial institutions to understand and categorize different companies and their activities. From that exposure table, we found that about 66% of those companies in the index were exposed to some degree to risks related to the blue economy. However, because GICS is not very granular, so it doesn't give you as much detail on the company and where they derive the revenue streams, their geographic location, etc. If we look at the risk of a full index, there is only about 1%, less than 1% risk per company. What that means is that we need company level data to be used in complement with this methodology. And so we invite investors to look at how this methodology was applied, but also complement it with company level data on their investee companies. And we invite them to use the UNEP-FI guidance to do that. That sets out the sort of questions that companies should be asked, that financiers should be asking their companies to understand their risks and impacts in the blue economy. Yeah, right. So as a conclusion, we can see from this report and from this model that there is significant value at risk to the blue economy if we do continue with business as usual investment and practices. Even within 2 degrees temperature rise, we still have significant risks. And this really emphasizes how important it is to try and keep global warming within 1.5 degrees temperature rise, so aligned with the IPCC's recommendations. Ocean risks alone could potentially affect about 66% of globally listed companies. And the results, we feel, are relevant to the financial sector, but broader than investors, to reinsurance, to insurance, to those with investments in sovereign debt, but also to governments and regulators. So if we put in place the essential policy levers that we need and invest in sustainable business practices that safeguard the blue economy, we could save up to 5.1 trillion or mitigate 5.1 trillion in risk. And more so if we manage to keep within 1.5 degrees temperature rise. Essentially, the key messages we had from this report is that we have to give from this report is that we have the tools, we have the data, and we have the projections we need. Investors can act with the best estimates at hand rather than wait for more information. And first movers will have the advantage here. We also want to show that this tool can help us pinpoint those critical levers and sustainable interventions, for example, supportive government policies, and can also help to support the range of various EU and international directives. So we want to just convey that right now it's more important than ever to commit to and support the net zero transition, to keep warming within 1.5 degrees, and to manage the impacts on our oceans. And that's both within the Baltic and also globally. I'm happy to take questions both in the chat. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time.
Thank you very much, Alison. And I think your presentation again proves what has been done also regionally, with assessing that no action will cost much more than interactive and proactive actions to reduce environmental impacts on the Baltic Sea. So very many thanks to you. And well, I'm looking towards the audience whether there are any questions from the audience here in the room. So far I cannot see anything. And I could not see any questions in question and answer function yet. So maybe if there is still hesitation for questions, please remember those if you are still humble to ask to the panel. And we are very happy to see the report and that it will be available for the regional policymakers and financial actors and governments as well. So let's move on then, and thanks once again, Alison. So we will move to the next speaker on stage, and there is a slight change in the program. Unfortunately, Antonia Leroy contracted COVID, so we are wishing her a swift recovery. And for that reason, the next speaker will be Henry Eviston, Sustainable Finance Policy Officer from WWF European Policy Office, who will present the EU taxonomy and its role in creating and enabling environment to support a sustainable blue economy. The report will cover how the EU taxonomy can support achieving EU environmental and biodiversity directives and HELCOM Baltic Action Plan by creating a classification system, establishing a list of environmentally sustainable economic activities. It could play an important role also helping the EU scale up sustainable investment and implement European Green Deal. So, Henry, very welcome. And the floor is yours now.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you very much for having me to replace Antonia. Unfortunately, as you mentioned, she is not able to attend. So I'm replacing her as a member of the Sustainable Finance team in WWF in Brussels. So just to be clear, I'm not an oceans expert, but I work on finance. So if there are any questions on the sustainable blue economy or things like that, I would be more than happy to refer you to my colleagues who are experts. Now, just to introduce what the taxonomy is. The taxonomy, for those who haven't heard of it, is essentially an instrument for transparency. It is an instrument that the European Union has developed in order to help it achieve its Green Deal objectives. It's also, in the European Union, a key, let's say, instrument that will allow us to obtain the objectives of Article 2 of the Paris Agreement, namely to shift financial flows towards sustainable activities. Now, in WWF's view, this is a robust framework Oh, sorry. Okay, there we go. It's a robust framework from a scientific perspective. I want to stress that it is a dynamic framework. So it's something that evolves as the science evolves. This is a point I will return to during the presentation. And finally, for the financial sector and also for companies, we feel that this is an instrument and a tool that you can adopt today, and it will help you to address the transition that we are trying to plan at the moment, the transition when we think of our 2050 goals and our 2030 goals. It can also help to engage with investee companies by providing data and providing transparency on their activities. So I want to address these three questions on the slide. I'll explain what the taxonomy is, and I'll explain how it can help the transition in our view. And then I'll just give a broader context of other initiatives that exist. One thing I want to stress, and one call to action, would be the importance of science-based policymaking is key. I think it has already been stressed by the previous two speakers, and I would like to call on FIs and governments, when you are engaging on this policy or on other policies, particularly to emphasize the importance of science-based criteria and science-based policymaking. So what is the sustainable taxonomy? Perhaps the easiest way for me to present it is to get you to think of three images, right? The first image I would like you to think of is a dictionary. And just as a dictionary is the basis for any language, because it tells you the precise meaning of words, a taxonomy, which is a classification of economic activities that are sustainable, will help us to understand precisely what we mean when we say green investments. It's something that originated in the green bond space, but it has application in other sectors and in other fields. So the first thing I want to say is it is a shared language. It gives us a shared understanding, and it provides the market and the public with the necessary confidence to make certain investments. The second image I would put forward is the EU energy efficiency label. You know, the label that you sometimes find on your domestic appliances when you're purchasing them in a shop. Think of the green part in that energy efficiency label. It's something that gives transparency about the performance of that appliance. Well, the same thing is true for the taxonomy. It does the same thing for economic activities, not appliances, but economic activities. And the last image I would like to give or use is that of a compass. And just like any instrument for navigation, where we wanted always to give us credible and reliable information, the taxonomy is something that will help us understand where we need to get to, and it will also help us sketch out a path to get there. And that's why it is, in our view, an important tool for the transition. Now, how is it structured? This is important because we've already heard that, you know, while there are certain policies on climate which are important, like the installation of renewables, it is also important to think of the health of marine ecosystems. And this is why the taxonomy tries to have an all-encompassing and comprehensive approach to the transition. So you can see that there are 6 objectives, 2 of which are climate mitigation and climate adaptation. The remaining 4 are each in their own way environmental objectives. And I want you to look particularly at objective number 3, the sustainable and use and protection of marine resources. So this is a key pillar inside the taxonomy. And it's a key pillar precisely because of the way the taxonomy is structured. For each of these 6 environmental objectives, you need to fulfill 3 criteria, 3 thresholds. These ones that you see on the right of my slide. The first is that each activity to be classified as sustainable must make what is known as a substantial contribution to at least one of these objectives. So climate mitigation, adaptation, marine, or others. But the important thing, and this is why it's so comprehensive, is that each activity must also do no significant harm to the remaining 5 objectives. And this is crucial when we're looking at marine and we're wondering how to balance, you know, policies that may have substantial contributions to climate mitigation. How do we address the issue of marine health and ecosystem health? Lastly, you must meet certain thresholds related to social safeguards. And this is important because the taxonomy also helps to address social issues that can arise from unsustainable or not less than sustainable practices. Now, you see on the left some key features of the taxonomy. Number 1, there's a legal requirement for the criteria to be science-based, based on conclusive scientific evidence. The second, which I want to stress, is that it's dynamic, it evolves, and we look at how this is relevant for the transition. The final one is perhaps most interesting for financial institutions and for companies. How is it applied? Well, for companies, for example, companies are required to publish the degree of alignment of their turnover and of their capital expenditure and operational expenditure. When I say CapEx and OpEx for short, and when I use these terms, I would like you, just for simplicity's sake, to think of investments. So whatever is in the future. We'll come back to CapEx as well, because it's a key metric in the taxonomy. Now, just to give you an example of what this looks like. So here you will see that we have criteria for fishing. And the first thing I want you to note is that the taxonomy is structured using NACE codes, which is the same system that we have used in other WWF reports, I think one of which has just been presented. And you can see here that there are substantial contribution criteria. The first thing you have to look at. In this case, because we're talking about fishing, I'm presenting you substantial contribution criteria for biodiversity, but it could be for other objectives. And just to give you a flavor of what it is, it deals with harvest levels, so no overfishing, avoiding bycatch, that sort of thing. But crucially, for marine resources, we have this do no significant harm threshold. So you have to look, there is a requirement, for example, to have a water use and protection management plan developed for potentially affected water bodies. This is not everything, but it is a sample of how the taxonomy works and why we think it's robust for sustainability, said widely. Now, at the moment, what I'm showing you here are the sectors that we are working on currently in the expert group on the taxonomy. If you look at these sectors, it's quite easy, I think, to see how the marine environment and the ocean especially is fundamental to a lot of them. Whether we're talking about agriculture and its interaction with the marine environment, whether we're talking about fishing, manufacturing, and the effects it can have on the ocean and freshwater ecosystems, or transport, for example. Transport is an interesting one because 90% of cargo globally is shipped, so it's transported by the oceans, and it just shows how crucial the ocean is to the work that we're doing, but especially to the sectors that we are analyzing in the taxonomy. Now, just to give you a quick idea of how we think the taxonomy helps the transition, I'd like to give you an example of a company in 2020. It's not a marine example, I'm afraid, but I hope I can explain it properly anyway. Take a company in 2020. It has investments and revenues from 4 different sources. One of which in 2020 is source A, which is a factory that manufactures electric vehicles. Okay, now under the taxonomy, that is considered aligned. So the investor or the company goes to their investors and they say, well, look, today it's 2020, 20% of my turnover is coming from this factory. The rest is not coming from activities that are aligned. But I can promise you that over the next 5 years, 80% of my investments, so 80% of this CapEx that you see here, will be in activities that are aligned with the taxonomy. And the company can then commit to investors that by 2025, as you see right at the bottom, they will have expanded the percentage of their turnover that it comes from taxonomy aligned activities to 50%. And this, in our view, is a very, very important way in which the taxonomy can help the transition. Now, because we're talking about 2020 and 25, I want to stress as well, there is an important element, which is these thresholds evolve. So as investments are made, it's important to keep this in mind that as the science evolves, these thresholds evolve, but I can come back to that if necessary in the questions. In conclusion, just to give you a taste of what is going to happen next. So currently the taxonomy is made up of climate criteria for substantial contribution. For the environmental objectives, we've worked so far on do no significant harm criteria. Next year, the expert group on the taxonomy will publish a proposal for substantial contribution criteria to the remaining 4 objectives. It should be adopted next year, and disclosure of the KPIs I mentioned earlier on, turnover, CapEx and OpEx, should happen from 2023. Now, in conclusion, and this is really my last slide, there is a separate initiative that WWF is working on, and that I think is goes in the same direction as the taxonomy. It's the Sustainable Blue Economy Finance Principles. It's led by UNEP-FI, but WWF is heavily involved in the technical work. And just to give you a sample of what we've done, that's my 10 minutes. The granular guide, we are producing granular guidance for the financial sector on shipping, ports. That guidance is produced and is ready. And we are currently in the process of coming up with more granular guidance, for example, on waste disposal. My final message is this: to the financial sector and to companies, inevitably over the next 5-10 years, there will be increased scrutiny on your operations, your decisions, your activities. There are tools, as Alison has mentioned, there are tools that can be used today in order to begin that transition. And we propose, I support the idea that the taxonomy is a robust framework, just like the finance principles. So my message would be, let's use them. So thank you very much for listening. I'm very happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Henry. And there were a couple of links provided also in the chat box to the previous reports that were already referred to. Just a very quick question, because we are, well, unfortunately running out of time already. To you, Henry, actually, what will happen to other sectors that are not covered by the taxonomy?
Yeah, that's a very important question. And it's one that the expert group that's designing the taxonomy, which is called the EU Platform on Sustainable Finance, which WWF is a member of, is working on pretty intensely at the moment. So the idea with the taxonomy was to start with those sectors and those activities that were the highest carbon. In other words, those sectors and activities which needed most urgent attention when it came to decarbonization. Of course, when you start with that approach, you can't possibly cover the entire economy. And because it is, it's quite complex technical work, it does also take a little bit of time. The taxonomy, as I mentioned, is a living document. So it's designed to expand, and it's designed to be updated every 3 years and 5 years, depending on the activities. I can get into detail if you like, but it's designed to be a living document. So it's going to grow. It's going to grow next year when we publish a final version of these substantial contribution criteria for the remaining 4 environmental objectives. There are a lot of sectors and activities actually that have been added already in that report that is coming. But then you can feasibly imagine that a lot of activities will be added the year after that and after that. So to anybody who says, well, gosh, I'm not in today, doesn't mean I haven't got a future. No, I would just urge people to be trustful of the process, which is ongoing. It is, it is a process that requires attention and care, but activities are being included all the time. So this is a document that will be updated regularly.
Thank you very much, Henry. I think we'll have to move on. And once again, thanks for this really enlightening presentation, and to all 3 keynote speakers. But now we have to move to the panel. And I have a pleasure of introducing our panelists today who are with us. And that's Andreea Stracinescu, head of the unit at Directorate General of Maritime Affairs and Fisheries of the European Commission. Andreea is responsible for promoting innovative and emerging technologies and solutions and ensuring broad dissemination of marine knowledge and research. Then we have Dr. Dennis Fritsch, Project Coordinator, Sustainable Blue Economy and Finance, UNEP Finance Initiative. Dr. Fritsch leads the United Nations Sustainable Blue Economy Finance Initiative, focusing on bringing banks, insurers, and investors together to develop guidance and tools to enable financial institutions to align their activities with the sustainable ocean economy. Then we have also Christopher Flensburg, Head of Climate and Sustainable Finance Business Development at Skandinaviska Enskilda Banken, or SEB. Mr. Flensburg joined SEB in 2003, and his division responsibility is to identify areas where financial mandates can help solve societal challenges and develop and implement solutions through collaboration with clients. And last but not least, we have also Valerie de Kerk, current Baltic Ecosystem Program Manager and Interim Director at WWF Sweden, leading coordination of the Baltic Seascape Assessment of Financial Flows project. She's in focal point for Baltic Ecoregion Program, Sustainable Blue Economy, Maritime Spatial Planning, Marine Protected Areas, and Finance work in Sustainable Finance. So we have these 4 prominent panelists, and before starting the panel discussion, we would like to ask our panel and audience, both on-site and online, for some quick questions. And please note that you should, if you are online, you should click thumbs up under the reaction button for a yes response. If it is a no response, do nothing. You can do the same also here in the on-site audience. So you just thumb up for yes and do nothing for no. So the first quick question is, are the majority of current financial flows enabling a sustainable blue economy in the Baltic? And let's see the reaction. Well, I do not see the reaction now in the, probably no reaction means no. So we do not think that the majority of current financial flows enable sustainable blue economy in the Baltic Sea region. Then the second question is, are you optimistic that regional financial flows could help support and restore the Baltic Sea and achieve good environmental status if the enabling environment is created? Yes or no? Okay, there are a few yeses. I see at least 3, 4, 5 maybe. And online is some as well. And the third question is, are governments around the Baltic Sea taking decisive action to achieve net zero by 2050 or sooner? Yeah, probably same hesitation, even more. See some nodding and some, yeah, mainly hesitation, as I can see it right now. So let's move on. Okay, that gives us quite quick sense check. So let's do a round of questions that are more specific to each of our panelists and which might give some perspective on how both panelists replied as well as the audience replied to those questions beforehand. And I will start with Andrea at European Commission's DG Mare. So very welcome, Andrea. And my 2 questions together are, what is DG Mare doing to boost the blue economy in Europe and the Baltic Sea region in particular? And the other one goes hand in hand with that. If you could comment on how you see the financing ecosystem in the Baltic Sea region developing.
Thank you very much. I hope you can hear me well. Thank you for having me today here with you, and I'll be more than pleased to present what we are doing to develop the financial ecosystem. In fact, our actions are taking at the broad European Union level, but of course we are aiming that at the end all the regions have access to finance and are equally developed. In terms of the blue economy, we acknowledge that access to finance is a problem. We conducted a market study in 2018 that showed that businesses in the blue economy sector, innovative, sustainable, circular, they have problem in accessing financial support, especially on the part towards market, even if they received previously Horizon 2020 or other national research funding support. So the study concluded that more EU investment support is needed in this area. What we did, we launched in 2019 the Blue Invest initiative, which had a double goal. First of all, we need to improve the investment readiness of the blue economy SMEs and startups. It's not only to throw, I would say, and to make finance available if you don't have the base, I would say, of the companies that are at that level. And second, of course, is to develop which are the suitable investment vehicle to close the gap and to blend as well the much needed investments from public and private sources. Where we are 2 years later, first of all, from the point of view of the investment readiness, I can say that we coached more than 170 SMEs and startups from coastal region across Europe. Some of them were already successfully being introduced to investors, and 7 already have secured private investment for their innovations. Now, there is a reality on which we work because we look in terms of readiness, I would say for investments, there is a certain gap in Europe. We saw that there are regions that are more advanced, where this is going, I would say, easily. They have a certain history. I would say that for the Baltic and Black Sea, we work and we organize a regular workshop, and we need, I would say, in our pipeline for projects, probably more SME and startups with innovative solutions. So in the first 2 years, because the support was given to European Maritime and Fisheries Fund, we are able to give grants. Blending was not possible. So we gave 40 million in grants only in the last 2 years. And we launched also with European Innovation Fund in 2019, the Blue Invest Fund, which deployed currently 70 million to a number of other venture capital funds who will use these guarantees to invest up to 300 million in the blue economy in the next 5 years. Mostly it will be in the European Union. As mentioned, probably more is to be done in the Baltic and the Black Sea. We saw that Atlantic, Mediterranean are more developed, but I think we have to look at the whole, as I said, ecosystem, and to see how we are able to bring really the SMEs and startups who are ready to make the step at this level. And of course, for this, we need the support of all, I would say, the partners. And if you on our side have brilliant ideas, we'll be more than happy to hear about this.
Okay, thank you very much, Andrea. Perhaps you can name some of the sectors and industries that are particularly strong and also that are at the same time supporting sustainable blue economy in the Baltic Sea.
What we saw a little bit is that for the moment, what we received in terms of interest, it stays in terms of, I would say, of the traditional sectors in terms of blue economy. We saw that there is an interest, of course, for the renewable energy offshore coming around ports. So it's mostly around traditional. Probably it will be looked to see as well in, I would say, the sectors of the future, because we know that blue economy biotechnologies, they have also a strong potential, and there are developments at this level. So what is staying a little bit, I would say, in the Baltic is at the level of the traditional ones mostly.
Okay, thank you very much. And maybe you would like to share what you would see national governments could do more to support or enabling financing of sustainable blue economy.
As I said, we work with startups and SMEs that are ready to make the step, I would say. At the level of European Union, you know that through the European Innovation Council, we give support to these entities. But probably at the level of the countries, probably something could be done as well through the development of national clusters that can push, I would say, innovation and bring, probably spread the word, try to involve more the universities, and I would say build that SMEs that can make the step and go to the next level. In the cluster, I mean, we work and we aim as well to put in practice, it will be probably in the second part of this 7 years financial cycle, and European Innovation Community for the Blue Economy. So a KIC, so a knowledge innovation community. So this is going to be put in practice. But of course, a lot can be done, can be started by national programs and trying, as I said, to bring closer universities to industries to see a little bit what is needed into the future.
Thank you very much, Andrea. We have to move to the next panelists with also a couple of specific questions to Dennis Fritsch from UNEP Finance Initiative. So Dennis, if you could please comment on whether you believe that government agencies and financial institutions and companies now have all the standards that are needed, and it's just a matter of raising awareness, gaining experience and applying those, or do you think that more standards are needed? And if so, or maybe you also think that there are already too many of those?
Thanks very much for having me, and yeah, happy to address that question. I think in terms of standards in general, we now have quite a good baseline for financial institutions and governments, at least as it comes to as it looks for the sustainable blue economy. However, I do want to highlight that on this topic specifically, such comprehensive standards and guidelines have not been available for all that long. So I would agree that now really we need to focus on implementation. At UNIBFI, as we've heard earlier through some of the previous speakers, we've been building a global community of banks, insurers, and investors to bring forward the development of a sustainable blue economy. And specifically, we support the implementation of the Sustainable Blue Economy Finance Principles, which aim to direct the flow of capital towards activities which directly contribute to SDG 14, life below water. And these principles have been around since 2018 and are really the first global guiding framework to finance a sustainable blue economy. And in terms of information on how to implement such standards in practice, guidelines for financial institutions have only been around since early this year. Building on the momentum of these principles, we've been working with members and external experts such as WWF, but also the European Commission on producing usable industry resources and tools, such as our practical blue finance guidance called Turning the Tide, which covers 5 sectors of the blue economy, including seafood, shipping, ports, marine renewable energy, and coastal tourism. And this is really meant to be a practical toolkit, which is available for free from our website. And I've also put the link to that in the chat. It outlines recommendations for financial institutions and businesses of how a transition towards a sustainable blue economy can look like, and is really there to help transition decision makers to learn how to avoid and mitigate environmental and social risks and impacts, as well as how to make the most of opportunities in a sustainable blue economy. So it really highlights activities across ocean-linked sectors which we recommend to avoid financing because they're simply too harmful and have a high business risk, which ones to seek out as best practice, and which topics to engage on with clients and project developers. And work, as Henry said, work on guidance version 2, expanding the thematic scope of our recommendations to plastics and waste management, as well as coastal infrastructure and resilience, is underway right now, with the final product expected in March 2022. So to summarize, I think the frameworks and guidelines exist and they are open access. The just discussed EU taxonomy, to which our guidance is aligned to, will also help in this regard. However, implementation of these is only starting now. We're currently working with our members on such implementation and are seeing promising results. But beyond our membership, I think awareness of why ocean health is crucial is slowly increasing. However, I would nonetheless advocate that more education on this topic is needed. We need to increase the ocean biodiversity and climate expertise within the financial and business sector, especially.
Okay, thank you. Then awareness and more of that. As UNEP Financial Initiative apparently is working quite a lot with the banking sector, and perhaps you could also elaborate a little bit of what do you think, what would you like to see banks to do more to influence sustainable blue economy financing?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, we do work quite a lot with the banking sector. We actually have a dedicated initiative called the Principles for Responsible Banking. And in general, I think it's important for banks, but also other financial players, to realize that building resilience and long-term stability into marine industries means reducing risks of default and ensuring that financial activities provide long-term viability and profitability. And the decline in ocean health may be an environmental and social challenge, but is also an economic opportunity. There's a clear business case for a transformation of ocean-linked sectors to a sustainable blue economy. So that's really, I think, the #1 priority. As I mentioned at UNIBFI, we convene a community of practice on this topic, and we really focus on providing guidance and tools to ensure that investment, underwriting, and lending activities are aligned with ocean health. And as we learned earlier in Miroslav's presentation, and also in our global Rising Tide report from earlier this year, traditional plain vanilla instruments and approaches make up the majority of finance flowing into ocean-linked sectors. So integrating blue finance principles and criteria into these will be critical to really move the needle. One thing I would like to see more from banks in particular is considering the use of such criteria in loan books. But even beyond that, there's a lot of things that can be done, like increasing internal expertise on the topic or assessing your exposure to the blue economy. I really think it's a crucial first step for any financial institution to know in what way they may already be negatively impacting marine ecosystems, and also what risks degrading ocean health leaves their business exposed to. The recent WWF report on value at risk in the blue economy puts a number to this for our global economy for the first time. As Alison mentioned earlier, if business as usual continues, we are looking at a potential cost of our unchecked exploitation of ocean resources of up to $8.4 trillion over the next 15 years. And taking a sustainable blue economy approach now and at pace will lower this damage significantly. And maybe to summarize this vicious circle of not realizing your negative impact on the ocean and consequently worsening of ocean health can really leave a bank and other financial institutions exposed to the high risks, particularly if left unchecked in a business as usual scenario. So the urgency of addressing the status quo by all stakeholders increasingly becoming clear.
Okay, thank you. And then yet another question to you. Naturally, you're certainly facing criticism, perhaps related to blue washing. So are you concerned about that? And if so, how to mitigate and avoid that?
That's a very good question. To be honest, I'm not overly concerned, as the topic of greenwashing is very much in the spotlight globally at the moment, which hopefully helps uncover the worst offenders. Also, I think people can relatively easily find out whether the organization they're looking at is green or blue washing in a way. It's a similar thing. On the financial institution side, the risk of green or blue washing can be avoided by having in-house expertise on these issues. So having in-house people who have scientific training in the topics at hand. And this is where a bank, an insurer, or investor can really benefit from having a diverse workforce, not only thinking about gender or ethnicity, which are of course crucial, but also of different skill sets that go beyond the traditional hires of people with a background in economics or finance. Also work with external experts or collaboration across stakeholder groups can help in this regard, of course. And one way we are doing this is via our community of practice, which includes experts from banking, insurance, and investing, but also from the scientific community, policymaking, multilateral development banks, and others. Lastly, when producing products around these topics, it's important to use internationally recognized standards and frameworks when investing, lending, or insuring in this space. As examples, I would maybe highlight ICMA's bond principles or our sustainable blue economy finance principles. And I think the final recommendation to avoid blue washing would be to really be transparent and report regularly on impact, because these two things are really key to create trust from clients, but also from wider society in the things that you're doing.
Great, thank you very much, Dennis. And then it's really great that we have also a representative of the banking sector with us. So I'll move on to Christopher and have a couple of questions to you. So if you could please describe the work at SEB, Skandinaviska Enskilda Bank, and how it's doing specifically to support the transition pathways and in particular enabling finance to contribute positively to a sustainable blue economy.
Yeah, so I will take the liberty to transform the blue economy into sustainable economy. So for us, it's not about blue; it's about blue and green and social. So it's the whole rainbow, basically. We're a bank, so our clients are coming to the bank to have financial advice, and that is our foremost duty. So when you make savings or when you do borrowings, you're coming to the bank to have the best financial advice, and that is our role in society. Now, we're also human beings, and we are a public institution which are having a society obligation. And as individuals, as well as a corporation, we want to create a better and more inclusive future. I think we all want to do that. I don't think that anybody can be excluded in that discussion. And consequently, where we're capable of understanding where we can make a difference with our financial advisory, with our financial interaction, we will of course do so. Now, the knowledge, the data, the transparency, the insight in respect to how financial interaction is actually impacting our globe, our ability to live, the Baltic Sea, but also many other seas, the blue economy and the green economy and the social economy, is fairly new. So all these data sets and the insight to how we impact is all things which I have not been educated in, and most of my colleagues have not been educated in. And that means that there have been mentioned a number of things here which are extremely important. So who is to define green? Who is to define blue? Who is to define social? We're not. We don't have the competence, and we don't want to be liable of defining right or wrong. So we need help there. We need to speak to academics. We need to speak to NGOs. We need to work together to the UN or UNEP, FI, and so on. And that is exactly the infrastructure that's about to be created. At the same time as we're doing that, we need to raise awareness internally. We need to educate our staff. We're doing that. So we have education going across the bank. We're identifying how this is impacting our risk measures. We're also identifying how we are being exposed to a different degree of compliance. So not only compliance in respect to regulations, but also in respect to investor expectations, in respect to general stakeholders' expectations, in respect to shareholders' expectations, in respect to the society's expectations on a financial institution. We failed. The financial society failed in 2008. Most bankers don't want to see that repeated, right? So what do we need to understand, and how can we communicate that? What is our compliance in that context? And lastly, looking away from the compliance and the risk, we are also into a massive shift. So we heard earlier in the report that there's a lack of capital for risk or for new seed capital and venture capital to new technologies. And bankers are quite conservative. I'm sure you're all aware of that. And that means that we're deploying money. We're not supposed to, when we're lending out money, if we lose money, the people who lend money to lose more. So the best advice we can give that is advice where our clients don't lose money, and thereby we don't lose money, right? So there's a massive opportunity, and when we don't understand something, we see a big risk. So we're into a journey. The financial world is into a journey where we get more comfort about the transition, understand what the future is looking like. So we talked about taxonomies. I'm a big fan of the taxonomy, and I'm a big critic of the taxonomy, right? So we need the taxonomy to define some kind of a universe and to engage on a broad level. At the same time, we have been consuming wrong for the last century. We need to change our consumption. So when we're creating a good universe, we're basically defining the way we thought good was yesterday, not what good looks what good looks like tomorrow. And to get to 2050, to get to a more efficient society, to get to a more inclusive society, to get to a society where we have good air quality and good water quality, we need to change our consumption. We need to change the way we consume. We need to change the technology we're using. That means that any taxonomy, any definition of finance need to include the solutions of tomorrow. And a taxonomy that was created yesterday do per definition not do that. So that's one of the big challenges we're having in front of us. So at the same time as we raise the floor with the taxonomy, we also need to move forward and say, okay, now we have at least reduced some of the damage. How do we move on? And all these kind of processes are things that's going on inside our bank, where we're creating systems and awareness and models to support industries which are moving towards lower pollution. I mean, the Baltic Sea is a good example. How do we clean up? I mean, all the slum at the bottom at the ocean. How do we get it out? How do we make sure that the cleaning facilities across from agriculture and from industries, that they're actually cleaning up before we're putting in the water? How do we make sure that we as citizens of the Baltic Sea work together? Because that was mentioned as well, and I think that one of the big challenges we are having in the banking system, in the society, as countries, that is that we don't have a problem which is belonging to one person. We have a problem that's ancient. It was created many years ago by our generation, the last generation, the generation before that, and we all need to address it now, and we need to address it together. Otherwise, we're not going to find solutions. And these challenges are structural challenges which we all need to work to. So I think a lot of that was addressed here. All of it is related to financial risk and financial possibilities. And that means that we as a bank, if we want to manage our risk and want to advise our clients in a good way, we need to understand not only the platform where we're standing today, we also need to understand the goal. We need to understand the challenges of getting to that goal. And we need to understand the sequence of moving there, so we don't exclude people in that path, but we actually create an inclusive transition and move as fast as possible. So that is what is going on in the banking system, at least in our bank. It was a lot of work.
Thank you very much, Christopher. Yeah, well, we touched upon, and you already described also in your comments and your reply. However, also Dennis, I think, touched upon that. What are the obstacles that are blocking so far the transition, especially for the financial institutions? And one of those was, well, I don't know whether it is an obstacle, but there is still lack of knowledge on marine environment and marine values. But perhaps you could also list something.
Yeah, so I mentioned a number of things, but there was one thing I didn't mention, and that is the scale of economy, right? So a lot of banks, big banks, are basically working a little bit as it's wrong to say supermarkets, but we have a lot of clients, and we have a lot of clients doing the same products, and like all big organizations, we're streamlining our production or our services to create good and efficient, cost-efficient products for our clients, and that means that when we're coming in with new solutions, they don't have the scale. People are not. They need to educate themselves to do it. We don't have the systems to implement them, and the natural consequence of that is that the introduction of new products is going to be more expensive. And I think that one of the biggest obstacles we have that is apart from the collaboration and the identification of what needs to be done, that is the scale of economies as one part, and then the risk of new technologies. So who's willing to take the risk of new technologies? This kind of dead valley where new technologies doesn't really reach the appreciation by clients, by the people that are going to use it, and the financiers. That valley should be shortened. So I think those two things are probably two of the biggest challenges, structural challenges we see in finance for moving ahead, alongside all the other things I mentioned and which have been mentioned across this discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think we'll move on to Valerie. And I would like to ask you, where do you see the greatest potential to influence the financial flows to develop a sustainable blue economy in the Baltic Sea region?
Hey, hello, everyone. Thank you for the question. I'm going to talk slowly so that the interpreters have time to follow me. And I'm afraid my answer is not a short one. So I would just like to start that, unfortunately, from the research, we saw that the Baltic blue economy is currently some distance from being a sustainable blue economy. The majority of current Baltic financial flows, of which 79% is total debt and 53% equity, are in economic sectors that, to varying degrees, hinder the attainment of a sustainable blue economy. The research shows that key levers that can be used to influence the flows as being debt instruments, such as bank and institutional loans, used primarily by the extraction sectors, capital lease obligations, used principally by the seafood sector, and notes payable, utilized by the renewable energy sector. And important financial actors, such as traditional asset managers and venture capital and private equity firms who hold a big chunk of the capital stocks across the diversity of holdings. I'll explain why they can be used to influence. So banks and institutional lenders have significant control over the terms of debt, and they have sway over virtually all companies and sectors. If the majority of all lenders were to adopt, as we've heard, the principles of the UNEP-FI Sustainable Blue Economy Finance Principles, as well as attach sustainability conditions to credit, and implement sweeping changes, like we've heard from Christopher, to address ocean health, climate, and biodiversity, as well as begin phasing out finance for activities that lead to outsized environmental damages, such as extraction activities occurring in, say, protected areas, we would already see significant change. As for capital leases, asset owners typically control the terms, potentially giving them control over selecting the lease recipients or even attaching sustainability conditions to the use of the assets. And as for notes payable, interest rate terms can be directly tied to sustainable outcomes by attaching stipulations for minimum minimum sustainability performance for a qualified borrower, or by stipulating that proceeds cannot be used for unsustainable activities. And last but not least, traditional asset managers are the largest holders of public companies, making their influence over shareholders' funds across a range of economic sectors an important locus of leverage too. I'll just stop there, but I just want to also mention that we can't lose sight of the characteristic of the sectors themselves. We heard during the presentation that economic growth has been driven largely by increased turnover from non-living related activities, such as the extraction and fossil fuel sector in the Baltic. The extraction is the largest of all in terms of turnover in the Baltic and has seen highest per sector growth rate. And touching upon the Russian comments, the share of financial flows in stocks is especially high in Russia. I should say the stocks are especially high in Russia. And obviously these sectors rank the worst in terms of environmental and social impact. So we need to acknowledge that currently there is a big disconnect between tapering down activities in fossil fuels to meet the net zero by 2050 and the average 33% fossil fuel year-on-year turnover growth that we are seeing in the Baltic. So as we just heard from other presentations, risk of business as usual pathways to both society and business are clear. Everyone must step up to their action. Governments, industry, and finance must collaborate and act now to ensure that efforts to invest and operate more sustainably lead to the growth of a vibrant and sustainable blue economy. Because if action is not taken now, all of us risk having a very difficult and more costly transition in the future. So I just want to also reiterate, this is a win-win situation for all involved, because without having a transition, we're not going to have a healthy economy, increasing growth and good well-being for the people. So I really see this as a win-win situation if we all get involved in the transition. I'll stop there. So we're over time, sorry.
Thank you very much, Valerie. I think you touched also upon several of the questions that I still wanted to ask you, but I believe also that with the reports that were presented today and that will become available quite soon with both financial flows report as well as value at risk report and EU taxonomy report, we will gain much more knowledge that certainly would be needed for enabling the transition to a sustainable blue economy in the Baltic Sea region. So if you allow me, then I will slowly wrap up today's event, and I'm very happy and thankful to all the speakers and panelists for providing your insights and your views, both sharing your comments regarding the presented reports, as well as speaking out of your own perspective. And it was particularly good that we had both intergovernmental organizations and international organizations, as well as banking sector and NGOs present, so representing also civil society perspective on sustainable blue economy. I feel that still a lot needs to be done, and but nevertheless we are moving ahead and moving towards this gradually to a healthy Baltic Sea, with transitioning of traditional financial flows and financial mechanisms, as well as on the need of more innovative types of financing to achieve a healthy Baltic Sea, and towards HELCOM objectives that were also, as you heard already, being adopted today. Enabling also the use of such tools for protection of marine biological diversity and those like nature capital and biodiversity financing schemes, for example. So I am very thankful once again to all speakers and panelists, and of course to the participants for attending this event and raising a number of important questions. I saw that some of those questions were already responded by our panelists and speakers online in the panel, and this will be available, I hope, in the report of this event. And also my very sincere thanks to the interpreters and staff behind this event for helping to share this important knowledge and information. I'm quite sure that with all your contributions, it will enable us to move ahead in optimizing financial flows, to help saving the Baltic marine environment. So with these words, many thanks on behalf of WWF Baltic Ecoregion Program and Coalition Clean Baltic to all of you, and goodbye to all of you also, and sorry, also on behalf of the HELCOM chair as well. She opened the meeting and this event. Very safe travel home, stay healthy, and by that we are closing this meeting. For those who are available here in the hall, I would like also to inform that there will be catering available outside this meeting room for all of you to enjoy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you, Misha.